please welcome to the stage Mr. John Fogerty. Okay.
Mind if I start right off and get a drink of water?
You bet. That's a good idea. We did we were fortunate enough to go to John's house a few weeks ago and conduct a rather comprehensive oral history for the archives as well, pieces of which you can see in the exhibit upstairs. And we thank you for allowing us to spend the afternoon with you. That was a lot of fun at your house.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
By the way, thank you all for coming. It's great to see you folks. Thank you. And Mr. Bob, thank you for doing this for me.
Oh,
wow.
yeah.
You know, I didn't realize you are the executive director of this place.
Whatever that
wow,
means.
I just thought you were a good guy that was talking to me. Cool.
Well, yeah, I am, but I don't like because executive directors of museums really aren't supposed to be doing these things, so I keep it really low key so that I get to be curator.
You would have scared me in my own house, that's for sure.
But anyway, it's a pleasure to have you here and be able to kind of get your story and get it into the archives, like I was saying, but also to start off talking about this new record, because it's a great record. It's gotten a lot of acclaim so far. And it's an unusual kind of record because it is a record, of course, made with a lot of contemporaries of yours, some of the great songs that you've written. Tell us how the record came to be, how you came up with the idea of doing this, and why.
Well, the first thing to correct is I didn't come up with the idea.
Ah, okay.
My beautiful wife, Julie, suggested the idea to me. We were just sharing family time. I think we were all sitting on the couch watching TV or something. And out of the blue, she suddenly says, why don't you get a bunch of people you love and sing your songs? And for some reason, that went directly in. I mean, I understood that as a fun, really creative thing. It wasn't some like career move thing that some agent calls you up and say, hey, I got this guy, that kind of thing. It was my wife saying, the artists that you love, John, and there are a bunch of them, and the idea of making new music, of creating, because I like to play, the song is sort of the vehicle, but I like to play. I'm a musician, and most of the people that I tend to really admire are also that way. A lot of them write songs. I think most of the people on this record write their own songs. Yeah. So it came about that way. I mean, that was how my brain processed what Julie said to me. So we talked about it a little bit, and over time I started calling people that, some of whom I knew, and a lot of them I didn't know yet, but I admired their music. And one of the first things I would say, I'd ask if they'd like to record with me. This was kind of the concept. And then when they said yes, then I said, all right, I want you to pick a song. And I don't know why I did that. I'm not really sure why that seemed like the thing to do. I'm really glad that's what happened, though, because what it really ended up being is that person already started down the road toward their idea, right? And so once they had picked the song, then I said, all right, it'd be great if you think about that and have an arrangement, have an idea. And, we'll talk again. I'll call you up or whatever, however we were corresponding. And we'll communicate about this before we ever go in a studio and kind of get a, direction. What that really meant to me was that I was off in that person's personality. Right, we were flying on their wings, as it were. I know when I talked with Keith Urban months and months before we ever got in the studio, we were talking about the song Almost Saturday Night, and he said, well, I kind of see sort of an organic thing. And I said, wow, that sounds interesting. I said, well, Keith, I had seen Keith a few times live in concert. Yeah. And I said, Keith, you always play that banjo. You know, not everybody realizes you're playing a banjo. It's on a lot of his records, but they don't realize he's the guy. I said, be sure you bring that banjo, you know. And that turned out to be a real winner because in the studio, I mean, he laid down some stuff that was, for one thing, when I finally went in and watched what he was doing, because he was sitting in a little booth for sound protection, and he was doing all that picking. You know, most people play banjo with several fingers. That's how you get that piston engine thing going. And he was doing it all with a flat pick.
Wow. Really?
So it was really interesting. So
you have a couple of people on that record though that you knew very, very well. So well that they're your children.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, we got kind of down the road with the idea. You know, we had been probably working on this for a year maybe. Had quite a few artists recorded. It still meant that I had to go back and kind of process each recording. You know, in other words, it wasn't usually done all finished. That artist part was done, and whatever they were going to play musically was done. But then if I needed some background vocals or if I needed some kind of little solo or something, that came about later. And as the record began to take shape, you know, I could see that this was really special. Certainly in my own career, you know, something like this may not happen again. And you know, my two boys have a band together, and they've been playing together, you know, with various folks. Right now, they've settled on a few other guys they're playing with. They've been doing this for many years, and the idea kind of came to me and my wife that, you know, it'd be really cool if there was a way they could play something. And so they picked the song, as happened in most cases. They picked the song Lodi.
Yeah. Actually, Shane is here. Could you give me a little light here? Where's Shane? Shane, where are you sitting? Where's Shane? Over here. Okay. What was it like recording with Dad? Where is he? There you are. Okay.
Is that the guy that won the 2 tickets a little while ago?
What was it like?
It was awesome. Yeah. It was fun.
And why did you guys pick Lodi?
I really like that song. I think Tyler does too.
Yeah.
It's a very touching song lyrically and musically.
Did you have to negotiate with him and say, okay, this is what I want for my performance and stuff?
Well, we did a little demo version with our band, and he didn't really like it that much. So he kind of said, I want a more rock and roll version. So we said, okay, let's do it, and we booked Abbey Road Studios.
Nice.
Here in London, and
Well done.
nailed it out there.
Well, it's a great track. Great track. Congratulations. All right. And
Thank
how
you,
was it
Shane.
for you?
It came out great, huh?
What was it like working with your sons?
It was overwhelming, and well, look, the reason for doing it in the first place, you realize it's just special. You know, this is a special record. I think I was saying that, and the idea that my kids who are musical could be on it with me, it just seemed like, I mean, all of you that are parents, you know what I'm talking about. It's just, wow, what a nice thing. It'll be there for a long, long time. You know, it's kind of like a Christmas photo or their photo when they were in the school play, or, you know, one of those memory things, except that it's right now. I don't know if everybody got to hear. We ended up recording in Abbey Road Studios in London. That came about because of their mother. You know, she's kind of cool about arranging things. In fact, we're all sitting here tonight because of Julie's arranging things. Thank you, honey. In other words, I probably wouldn't have a career. I wouldn't know you, and there would be no display, I'm quite sure, unless Julie had, put her hands on this.
Very true.
So recording with the boys, as Shane alluded, they originally had kind of a folk rock version of Lodi. I would call it kind of soft. The boys are huge fans of Fleet Foxes, if you happen to know who they are. I love them too, but my song, I'd always pictured if I was ever going to do that one again, I wanted
Rock it.
that.
Yeah.
And so I kind of used that, what do you call that? I had a longer straw, and I kind of,
You won.
Yeah.
It's your song. You won. So look, when we think about these songs, I mean, many of these songs, of course, are classics. And when you up in the exhibit, I talk about your writing process. We talked about there was a point in the late 1960s where you were just on one heck of a ride. I mean, there's song after song, talking about the Creedence years, when it just everything you seemed to write seemed to turn to gold and was just an amazing piece of work. I love what Bruce Springsteen said. He compares you to Hank Williams, and it's an accurate description. These songs are timeless, and those songs just touched part of America's soul in the late 60s that I don't think a lot of other bands that tried achieved. How did that happen? Why did that happen for you in that period of time?
Well, I'm not going to sit here and really say that I controlled the universe and all the stars aligning. There's a lot to it that's pretty mystical even to me.
Yeah.
But I will tell you the reason. I had spent from the time I was conscious, really, probably 3-4 years old, I knew I loved music, and by the time I was 8, I was pretty doggone sure I was going to have a life in music. I had named my imaginary band. Remember, this was 1953. A brand new sports car had come out in America. So I called my band Johnny Corvette and the Corvettes. And I was Johnny. So for a long time, I had thought about music. I'd made choices. There was the people who I liked. Even if they weren't in rock and roll, there were guys that I seemed to like. Bing Crosby, because he seemed like a nice fella. This is unfair, but I was a little kid. I didn't like Frank Sinatra so much because he didn't seem as nice as Bing. Now that we're all older, we understand there's a lot of PR and all that stuff.
Did you see
and
Elvis?
I like Frank, by the way, but I had made a lot of those choices. I'd done a lot of in-depth thinking about a life in music, I guess.
Yeah.
And so here we were in 1968. We'd been through the whole Gollywog thing and the Blue Velvets and a couple of other names, and finally had a song on the radio called Susie Q.
Yeah.
And now I didn't write that song, but that song is full of cool things. Number one, it was the original record by Dale Hawkins, who was from Louisiana, a white guy, but he was on that label with Bo Diddley and Muddy Waters and the Chess Brothers, and the guitar player that I didn't know at the time, but I recognized great art. That was James Burton playing that lick, and so that song, how can I say it? It kind of revealed what I'd been paying attention to.
Right.
Anyway, to kind of get to the chase here, I took stock. Now I'm on the radio after all those years of failure, but nobody's watching. Now the spotlight's on you, and I was well aware of what you might call the sophomore jinx or the one-hit wonder,
Yeah.
And oh my God, the spotlight's on you, and it only stays for a brief moment, and then, if the next thing is not right, they go on to the next guy, the next thing. And I took stock, and I said, well, God, we're on this tiny, tiny label, the smallest label in the world. It's a jazz label. I don't even know anything about rock and roll. We don't have a manager. We don't have a publicist. We don't have a producer. We don't have big money like Columbia Records or something, or Lord, the Beatles, And I just said, all right, we're going to have to do it with music. And so, I lit a fire under my own rear end to basically come up with as much music as I could and kind of overwhelm the audience or the market or whatever you want to call it. Just, that was the whole concept, by the way, behind having a good song on both sides of a single. For you older people, you know what that is. You younger people don't know what the other side of something is. But the Beatles had done that, Elvis had done that. People that were really worthy gave you lots of good music. And so, even though I was told at the time, you're wasting that song, Born on the Bayou, no one will ever hear that song. It was the other side of Proud Mary. But to me, the idea was that instead of wasting that thing on the other side, do it the best you can, and your audience will reward you. They'll like you.
Yeah. So when from like 67, 68 to about 72 or so, that string where you had like top 10 singles or whatever, and sold, just amazing amounts, playing Woodstock. So much is happening to you. How did you continue with the creative process? How were you writing on the road? Did you have a way in which you'd sit down every day like a craftsman and turn these things out? Were you gaining inspiration from books, from other artists? Talk about that creative process.
Well, let's see. When I got off of active duty in the summer of '67. I lived in the Bay Area, so some of you may know that was the summer of love.
Right.
It was exploding right across the street. And I had made a real promise to myself that, I'm going for broke here. And so I decided I needed to get organized. We talked a little bit about this before. I had always just sort of written a song as it kind of happened. I'd go find a napkin or piece of paper somewhere and I'd scribble some words on it, and maybe weeks would go by or some amount of time, and finally I'd have a whole song with no real, what am I going to do with the song? There was no real reason to have a song. I just felt compelled to write a song. Now I knew it was different. I had to sort of direct it a little better. So I went down to the local drugstore and bought a little notebook, which what I was going to do was put my ideas into the notebook. When I had an idea about a song, it quickly really became a song title book. In fact, when I bought the little thing and the little slug of paper to stick in it, and came home and put that in there, and I think the title page is song titles. And then it was empty. Remarkably, a few days or weeks later, I got the phrase Proud Mary came to me. So I went and got my book, and that was the very first entry on the first line, Proud Mary. I didn't have a clue what that meant. But obviously you can see that the idea of getting organized was a pretty good one. As I began to, write and fill in other things. I think within those first 2 or 3 pages, there's Bad Moon Rising, Lodi, don't know if Born on the Bayou is there, but there were like 3 or 4 really strong titles right away. And I began to, what I would call it is, I didn't sit down really to write, because I'd heard about the syndrome where people sit in front of what a typewriter is. Guys are going to write a novel like Ernest Hemingway, right? And they'd put the paper in the typewriter, and then they'd stare at the blank paper for ages, right? And I was well aware of that syndrome. That, well, the best I can do is create the atmosphere where something might happen. So for me, that meant going somewhere quiet. I had a room upstairs a little later in another house where I could be alone and quiet. That usually meant the middle of the night, by the way. I would cup of coffee. In those days, I smoked. Cigarettes, one of those yellow pads of paper, and my guitar. And I would just kind of sit there and wait for an idea. I'd fiddle with the guitar and come up with a guitar lick. It was just one of those deals where I wanted to, set it up so that something might happen. Now, I have to say that I was pushing myself to write songs. Therefore, for every, let's say, good song you heard, like Bad Moon Rising, there were, I used to say then, there were 10 more that were stinko. But I didn't finish those. I usually, I'd get a verse or 2 verses and a chorus or something, and I go, man, this is just dead end. It's it's not good. So I would really just kind of stop and go on.
But you know, the interesting thing, take a song like, Born on a Bayou. Here you are, you're in the Bay Area, and you're writing about bayous. There's no bayous up in the Bay Area. So where does that come from? And I want to continue that because the coolest thing about Creedence has always been that here you were in the Bay Area, Summer of Love, 1967, hippies everywhere, across the bay, psychedelic sounds are just exploding. Golden Gate Park is going off with all kinds of amazing things. Time Magazine calls it the Great Summer of Love, as you said. And you guys sound nothing. I mean, if a person from New Jersey, me, I thought you guys were from the South. I mean, you had to be from the South. You sounded like you were from the South. You looked like you were from the South. And the songs seemed like they were from the South. When I heard that you were from the Bay Area, I can't believe that. How did that happen?
Well, the older I get, I'm not being whimsical here. The more I kind of think it might be reincarnation. I know it's for those of you that aren't, don't have that bent, then I'm just wacky to you guys. But there is. It's sometimes it just seems like there's more stuff going on than we see. I mean, in the old days, I would say, oh, well, I listened to Bo Diddley and Elvis, and that's a pretty good explanation.
That's right. The roots. That's right. Yeah.
But I seem to really be pretty focused. I mean, even on movies that I loved, there were several that I referenced in my life. I really loved Mark Twain, obviously. I loved Stephen Foster. My mom had actually told me about Stephen Foster when I was about 3 years old. And she had a little record. I was in nursery school. And she gave the record to me. So somehow that made it my possession. And she explained to me that Stephen Foster wrote these songs. It was Oh Susanna and the Others Hide. Was Camptown Races, Doo-Dah, Doo-Dah.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I thought that was Stephen Foster on the record. Why not? Hey. I believe it was kind of a kiddie record. If it was probably yellow, so that might give it away. You guys, you got to understand, this is in years by the calendar, that's probably 1948 or 49. So, yeah. Just to give you folks that underneath this, there's a lot of gray hair. And so, I tended to veer off toward that. There's a great old movie with, God, I can't think of his name now, but Walter Brennan. He's cottonmouth bit. Anyway, it's called Swamp Fever with Dana Andrews. And Dana Andrews is the revenuer. He's going into the swamp. He's going to catch that moonshiner, Walter Brennan. But then he gets bit by a snake, and Walter Brennan nurses him back. Anyway, then it's very Southern. All kinds of colorful phrases, the way people in the South talk, or at least in the movies. There was another great movie with Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier called The Defiant Ones. Two prisoners that were, a black man and a white man chained together on a chain gang, and they get away they escape, and the whole movie is about them. The culture is really to a young kid trying to figure out what all that was. It was very inspirational. So I for some reason I veered toward that, and of course the great music. Bo Diddley, Muddy Waters, Elvis Presley. As a matter of fact, when I went to the very first Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, this was 1986, and I was there to induct Buddy Holly. They had a big picture of each one of the inductees. There were 10. And I looked at all the 10 because I had that question about why in my head. And all of them, I said, 9 of the 10 I knew for sure were from the South. And Sam Cooke I wasn't so sure about. And later, I went home in the years before the internet. Somehow I looked it up, and he was from Georgia. So I mean, to me, if the earliest icons of rock and roll are all from the South, that kind of was at least the map of where I should go.
You told me earlier today that later on you took a trip down south for the first time to Mississippi in particular. Recall that.
Well, actually, it was several trips. Around the late 80s somewhere, I started having this, I didn't even know what to call it. I was having this kind of a daydream, and then it got stronger. It turned into sort of an urge, like a something that just wouldn't leave me alone, like a little voice in my head. And finally, I realized I'm supposed to go to Mississippi. And I'm going, what? It got stronger and stronger and stronger. Kind of like in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where Richard Dreyfuss starts building that mashed potato tower on, It was sort of like that. And I'm, God, what's up with this? And finally, I come to my wife, Julie, and I say, honey, I got to go to Mississippi. She goes, really? You ever been to Mississippi? No. Well, why do you got to go? I don't know. Well, when are you going to go? Now. God bless her for humoring me. Anyway, I ended up taking about 6 trips, I think. And I told myself in the process, I'll try and make this quick, sorry. I told myself, well, I've always wondered about the blues tree, the family tree of the blues. All these people like John Lee Hooker and Muddy Waters and the later Jimmy Rogers, who was in Muddy's band, and so many wonderful musicians from Mississippi who had a huge influence on me. A lot of those guys had records on the radio at the time I was just coming of age, about 7, 8 years old. So anyway, I did all these trips. At one point, I did a lot of reading. I was listening to a lot of music, driving around, trying to, you're visiting graveyards, and what you learn kind of quickly is you're visiting black graveyards as opposed to white graveyards. And the funny thing is, for a person like me that's grown up, I remember explaining to a guy at a barber shop, I asked him where so-and-so was buried. He was a white guy. And I finally said to him, these people are like the founding fathers. It's like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. I had never thought of anything really separated. The way in California we tend to be that way, In Mississippi it was, even then, was still quite different. Anyway, I eventually find myself at the supposed, the mythical burial place of Robert Johnson, right? And, Robert is a rock star right at that moment. This is 1990. The record company has released a box set CD of all of the known recordings of this mythical guy, Robert Johnson, who died of, uncertain conditions and not quite sure where or even how old he was. And so I find myself there, and it's a very hot, humid day in Mississippi in the summer. I'm standing there, and I remember about the box set. Somebody's making millions of dollars off of Robert Johnson. And God, I wonder who owns those songs. It's just a natural thought. And then I get a really disgusting picture in my, oh God, it's probably some lawyer, with a cigar up in a big building in New York City. And I was creeped out by that whole probably all too true scenario. And finally, like in a statement almost like, a bravado, I said, it doesn't matter, Robert, those are your songs. Like arguing with myself, out in this graveyard alone, next to the Mount Zion Church. And it must have looked pretty weird. Anyway, but Robert, it doesn't matter. Those songs are your songs. Everybody knows those are your songs. Those songs belong to you. And I'm kind of going like that. And this thought goes across my brain. I'm the guy who famously was not singing my own songs that I'd written because some other guy in a tall building, probably with a cigar, had kind of stolen them away from me. And I was pretty, as you probably heard, I was pretty angry about that. I wouldn't sing the songs. Anytime somebody pushed the right button, I'd go off on a 20-minute diatribe or whatever you call those, rant. And as I made this declaration of Robert's songs, I realized, John, that's your story. That's the same thing, John. Those are your songs. You got to start singing your songs before you're laying here like Robert, Now, this was 1990, and I really didn't get it all together and get an album recorded. The album was Blue Moon Swamp until 1997. Now, mind you, here's the part that gets a little mystical. Mind you, I still thought all those trips I took to Mississippi were just for my own kind of indulgent, history lesson. I wanted to know about John Lee Hooker. I wanted to know about Petey Wheatstraw. I wanted to know about Charlie Patton, And so forward in time to 1997, I finally finished my album Blue Moon Swamp, and I meet with this guy from the label. His name's Davin, pretty well-respected writer. Sorry that I confess I can't remember his last name. He wrote bios and pieces about lots of artists, and he was doing this one for Warner Brothers for me. And so he was going to make a biography and all that. And at some point he says, "Well, John, I hear that you took some trips to Mississippi." I said, "Yeah, Devin. I went down there because I was, finding the family tree of the blues. I was just kind of trying to get it all straight in my head because a lot of these artists were hit artists to me. I didn't really realize they were such blues icons. They were kind of recording stars to me." And says, he says, "Well, tell me about being at Robert Johnson's grave. That must have been interesting." I said, "Oh, yeah, well, and I was standing there talking, to myself about Robert, and then I realized that, his position, his condition with his songs was a lot like my condition." And I said, "Dabin, I decided that day to start doing my songs." I said, "Oh, my God." I hadn't realized until that moment, talking to that writer 7 years later,
Wow.
that I said, "Dabin, that was probably the purpose for my trip to Mississippi. I didn't even know it, right? It's like somebody got in the back door of my brain and made it happen." But, later that was what that was all about. Because obviously then I started doing my songs again.
Speaking of your songs and speaking of that which was a great story, by the way, you were involved in, I think for musicians and for songwriters, what could be considered a landmark legal battle. And, some of these people may not know exactly what it is that you're referring to, what I'm talking about. I'm wondering if you could kind of summarize that for us. And I know you have the guitar over there, and give us a little bit of maybe a demonstration on what it was all about, because it's really fascinating. And you seem to really stand up not only for artists' rights, you took some bullets there for a number of artists, so that after the case was won, a different story for other people coming down the road behind you.
Okay. I'll try and be a little more concise than I was with the last story. Wow. Well, my album Centerfield came out in 1985.
Yep.
And there was the first hit single from that album was a song called "The Old Man Down the Road." I'll play a little bit of that song in a minute. But anyway, the album itself went to number one. So I mean, for a guy who'd been away from showbiz and the music biz for as long as I had, since about 1975. This was, I can't even express to you how overwhelmingly cool it was. There was the fact that it was a hit record and all that, it felt like all the crap I'd been through when I was alone was worth it. And so I was allowed to feel that way for a couple of weeks anyway. And then I got wind, the people at Warner Brothers said, "Well, your old record company is making noise like they're going to sue you." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, they say that your song is like another song that they own." I said, "Really?" I mean, it really had not occurred to me at all in that context. And the first time they told me the story, they said, yeah, they're saying that their old song, Green River, that they own, is like your song. And I'm going, really? Wow, I don't know. And so then, a little time passed, and I'm talking with the head honchos at Warner Brothers one day, and they said, well, now they're saying your new song, Old Man, is like the song they own, Run Through the Jungle. And I go, wow, I was just really kind of bummed about that. So it didn't all happen right away. All I know is there was these rumblings, and we're going to sue you, and then finally, eventually, a lawsuit is filed. And as you folks all must know, when you watch television, the legal process takes a long, long time, and it's basically it gets into the hands of the lawyers. I think that's by design, so that even when you win, you lose. Put it that way. But I knew I didn't get into this business. I didn't even call it a business then. I just knew I loved music, right? And I think something I really would like to express before I start playing a little bit is that a lot of times you're kind of forced into taking a position. In other words, something lands on you, and okay, how are you going to react? What are you going to do? And sometimes you get painted as a certain character by the way that you react. Yeah, sure. I've thought about this, many times over the years, because I'm well known as that guy that went to court a bunch of times, right, in music. And that was sure never my plan. It isn't anything that I ever really wanted to do. All I ever wanted to do was make music. And the strange thing, I've seen this happen to athletes quite recently too, and sometimes even other people in entertainment, where something lands on you, and really there is no choice. You have. Your reaction should be, if you're a man, you have to have a certain reaction to it.
Yeah. There's a line, I guess.
Yeah, and unfortunately then, here you are doing something, and how can I say, because you're the visible one, it looks like you're the troublemaker to everybody. Yeah. But in fact, all you're doing is kind of reacting to something kind of mean and evil that was, thrust your way. And you can either just go like that and go, it's not worth it, and do nothing and lose, or stand up, which is kind of the way I was made, and be willing to basically fight it. What do they say that, all the way to the, all the way to the Supreme Court. It actually happened. And that wasn't, although I'm a history buff, and, I love civics and government and all that. I never planned to meet or to visit the Supreme Court in the manner that I did. Anyhow, let me grab a guitar and kind of show you what this was about. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, okay. Well, anyway, so even though I happen to think that the whole thing was kind of a put-up job, meaning the other people that own the first song, Run Through the Jungle, they did have to present some kind of a case. Unfortunately, it can be a really thin, whimsical case, but if they spend enough money and have enough lawyers and all that, it will go and are willing to go through the process. It'll, rather than figuring out why can't we have more music in our schools, or why can't we have universal health care that doesn't cost $1 zillion? They worry about dumb stuff with greedy record companies trying to take advantage the creative process. The first song. Okay, so even though that's not really the part that's copywritten, that was the beginning of Run Through the Jungle. Played much better when I was younger. And, it was played in drop D, by the way, and nowadays I just tune a guitar down. But anyhow, the first verse was, thought it was a nightmare. Lord, it's all so true. They told me don't go walking slow. The devil's on the loose. Better run to the jungle. Better run to the jungle. Better run to the jungle. Why don't look back to see? Okay. So the new song. Thank you very much. I'm trying to make this pleasant, even though it was kind of a, it's legal, lawyers, all that junk. One day in my studio, probably 83 or maybe even 84, I'm just fooling around with stuff, and I suddenly go, and wow. This is the creative process. I'm standing and hey, I like that. See, now when I sit down with the guitar, lots of times I just. What is that? And, it's kind of how that would have happened. And I'm sitting there. It's like I've asked a question. Yeah, it needs like an. I'll just play it twice. Nah, that's dumb. There's so many things you could do, and I believe me, I did them. And I'm standing there, and so somewhere between the intellect part and the passion part, the emotion, because this kind of playing is way more emotion than it is smart. I mean, Lord knows I'm not the great guitar player virtuoso. But the emotion thing is really important, getting that. That was like a great big steel door going. Bam! It was like done, right? That was cool. And I went over to that book, that songwriting book, right? And I opened it and I started thumbing through there, and I saw the words "somewhere down the road," right? And as I was singing that, I thought, boy, that's pretty vague. Somewhere down the road. It just sounds more evil than that. And finally came up with the idea, the old man down the road. Wow, that's a dude. He's a bad dude. He's got a suitcase covered with rattlesnake hide, right? The interesting thing about this is I went back and looked at that book like 5 years later. There's no line in there that says somewhere down the road. It's not there. It was never there. Somehow I thought I saw that, but you see how that kind of works in a strange way? Okay. Anyway, so to the song. He take a thunder from the mountain. He take a lightning from the sky. He bring a strong man to his begging knee. He make the young girl mama cry. You better hide it high. You got to jump up and run away. You got to hide it, hide it high. The old man down the road. You better run to the jungle. Gotta run to the jungle. Gotta run to the jungle. Oh, don't look back and see. It's a similar thing, but the notes are in different places, okay? You got to hide. Well, let me sing the verse again. He take a thunder from the mountain. He take a lightning from the sky. He bring a strong man to his begging knee. He make the young girl mama cry. All right, how about this one? All you pretty women, come on to my home. You don't have to worry. I won't do you no harm. And bring it on home. Bring it to Jerome. Bring it to Jerome. That's Bo Diddley, if you didn't know. See, the unfortunate thing here was in this stupid lawsuit thing, they were able to present it as if it's in a vacuum. There's only this song and this song in the whole universe of songs, and these two songs happen to be kind of similar. Therefore, obviously, it's as night follows the day, this song must have come from that song. But that's stupid, because there are 8 million songs that kind of sound like those two songs.
And in essence, they were saying you were plagiarizing yourself.
Yeah. And the unfortunate, there's a couple of things I really want to point out. Number one, since they didn't have, the bad guys, they didn't have me presenting their case. They didn't have a musician to present their case. So they got, they got a computer geek. And what he did was he programmed the melody of Run Through the Jungle into the computer. Boop, 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 boop. It really sounded like that, folks. Boop, 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 right? And then he played that for the jury. Pretend you're the jury. It's like 110 degrees. You've been sitting there since 8 o'clock in the morning every day for 2 weeks. Now they're finally going to, after they did all the whereas and foras and all that, now they're going to actually play the two songs, and they play it. The first one, here's Run Through the Jungle. I'll try and do it like, let's see, thought it wasn't. Boo, 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 boo. Right, and then they, after that, they play, now here's Old Man Down the Road. Boo, 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 right? And so the people are like, even I'm kind of, right. But the remarkable thing to me is, and I don't think they'd ever done it, it's kind of like O.J. and the Gloves, I don't think they'd ever done it ahead of time, because what their witness explained to the jury was, now, the fact that where the notes are the same, you're only going to hear one note, because it's the same note in both songs. He said, what we're going to do is we're going to play both songs at the same time, right, from the computer, boo, boo, right? He said, so where you're only hearing one note, that's where the two songs are similar. He said, anytime you hear more than one note, that's where the two songs differ.
Right.
And so it went boo, 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 and then suddenly there were two, everywhere, notes, like that, and everybody, you could see the air go out of the whole room, because there was two notes. All the rest of it, and I'm looking at, all their high-priced people. I said, didn't you ever do that before?
Right? Did you play for the? Did I read somewhere where you actually played?
Yes. Well, when it came to our side, my side presenting the case, I did exactly what I just did for you folks. I played a little bit of each song and sang the song, and I don't know if anybody really thought this out. But think about it. If you're in a courtroom and you're going to get to hear boo, 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 or you're going to get to hear some guy go, you got the hottie hat. Now, I should tell you, there is another little part of this whole thing, right? The thing dragged on for, I mean, my pocketbook certainly knew. Yeah. It dragged on for a few weeks. And Saul Zaentz got up on this, he's the head of, he's the guy that owned all the copyrights for Fantasy Records. And he got up on the stand, and at one point, my attorney, the attorney from my side, says, well, Mr. Zaentz, isn't it true that this whole lawsuit that you're bringing against Mr. Fogerty, isn't it true that it's a vendetta? And he goes, it's an answer to a vendetta! And steam was like coming out of his ears. I mean, right? Well, if you didn't think it was a vendetta before, he certainly showed that. And then he went on, though, to testify while I sat there absolutely dumbfounded, because this was stuff I didn't know about. Well, Mr. Zaentz, why did you bring this lawsuit against Mr. Fogerty? He said, well, one day, one of the members of Creedence Clearwater came to my office. And the way he said it was, Doug Clifford, the bass player, because that's in the testimony. Yeah. Now, Mr. Zaentz, there were only 4 guys in the band. I mean, imagine not knowing John, Paul, George, and Ringo. I mean, and since we were his golden goose, not knowing Doug, Stu, Tom, and John. Right. But anyway, he called the bass player Doug Clifford. Right. And he said he brought with him a record of Old Man Down the Road and Run to the Jungle. And he said, the bass player played for me both songs, and then he said, Saul, John is ripping off Creedence. You should sue him.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. So the moment I heard that, I'm sitting in the court, as you might have seen my notebook out in the, I took notes of every day. But anyway, I was like, what? Wow. But I mean, just because some guy says you should sue somebody, of course, Saul in his, in his humanitarian mood says, okay, I'll do that.
Wow.
All right.
But when you do win, and of course you do win, was there a sense of satisfaction for you beyond just winning your own artistic freedom? Did you see this case as being a bigger case? Because ultimately it does. I mean, it really settled a few things for once and for all about plagiarizing.
It's really, this stuff, I mean, can be really nasty. Now suspend in your mind the idea that I'm being sued for, obviously, for sounding like myself. These people that are suing me hold a copyright worth millions of dollars to them. Yeah. And I've written a new song, and they want to contend that the new song plagiarizes their song. That kind of lawsuit happens occasionally, where it happened to George Harrison, crying out loud. Yeah. That's not so unusual. The fact that it was the same guy was very unusual. Yeah. And the fact that there was obvious, it's an answer to it. It was obviously some bad blood there. Yeah. The part that was really awful. Okay, you got the old song, the new song. The old song is a songwriter and a publisher. Now, the old Fantasy Records is the publisher of the old song. They still have to pay that songwriter, me, right? It's roughly 50-50. The new song, which was written also by me, called Old Man Down the Road, I'm the songwriter, but I'm also the publisher. After hanging around those guys for a few years, I finally figured out, wow, this publishing thing looked pretty good. Maybe I should do that. All right, so I'm the publisher and songwriter of the new song. I'm only the songwriter of the old song. But Judge Conti, I will say his name, he had ruled right at the beginning of the trial, like the first day, if Fantasy prevails, then the new song is nothing, and those guys own the whole thing. So every penny that I had earned, even as a songwriter of the new song, I was not going to be paid for the new song. Zero, zilcho. In other words, as if it didn't exist, except, of course, in the accounting sheets.
Right.
I mean, that was the most. Luckily, that didn't happen. But can you imagine how mean-spirited and topsy-turvy that is?
A double loss.
Right,
Well, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So I think it's very important to just say that the idea of any author, any writer, songwriter, particularly in my case, being sued on his later work because it has what I would say is a personality similarity. My songs tend to sound like my songs, right? And if you are going to be hogtied by some legal ruling, especially with my name on it, for the rest of time, oh yeah, there's that Fogerty ruling. Anything you do from now on, we own it. One of the other weird things that the old song had the words thunder and lightning in it somewhere. Run Through the Jungle had some allusion. I can't find it right now, but it's in there. And of course, Old Man Down the Road, he take the thunder from the mountain, he take lightning from the sky. So part of what they presented was that they own thunder and they own lightning. Right. So luckily, I had written in my, let's say, quiet years on an album I had done in 1975, I think. There's a song called The Wall. And the very first line, I don't know, and they played that. They played real music for the jury. And thunder, lightning, da-da-da. No, it was right there in another song, a third song. And we actually proved that out in the world, other authors have used the words thunder and lightning. Okay, enough of it.
That was amazing, wasn't it? That was great. That was great. Here, we'll use this.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So after the breakup of Creedence, and you do Blue Ridge Rangers, and a couple of other things, but then you kind of disappear. What happens? What are you doing in the late 70s? Where are you writing? Have you become so disgruntled with the business that you just had enough?
No, I mean, to very truthfully answer your question, let's see. I had gone to the people at Fantasy. I had finished the Blue Ridge Ranger album. This was 1973. And obviously I had picked a whole bunch of songs that I didn't write. It made it easier. I was starting to feel, I guess you'd call it writer's cramp, something like that. And so I did a bunch of other people's songs, and it gave me, I made a record, which was what I thought was my job, And then I actually called a meeting with the executives at Fantasy. Now they're in a big, fancy building that the Creedence royalties had built, So there's some irony to that whole, I'm visiting their mansion, as it were. So I had said, I need to talk to all you people, right? So I went down there all by myself. I didn't have like a lawyer or anybody to go to the meeting with me, and they're all just like, they're all sitting in a room. And my purpose was to try and, these are the 4 years before that, we were all in the same economic position, dreaming about having a career in music, maybe, as we all say, making it. It's a dream that many, many, many young people share, or even as you get older, you still keep the dream, Shows like American Idol are really their whole stock and trade is about that look in the eye of people that have a dream, and they really don't want anyone to crush that dream. So I'm talking to the same people that are now, very successful from the music I've made, and I'm saying, basically my purpose was to try and argue for a better position economically for myself, and maybe kind of whittle down the zillion years of the contract that I owed them. You know, I was so kind of bothered by it that I couldn't write. I couldn't create. And I mean, that was in a very honest, truthful way. That's why I went in the door. And so they had all the honchos there and all that. And I thought it was going to be, even though I was really pissed at those people, you know, for what they had done to my band and me just by kind of dissing us all the time. They really treated us like some kind of servants or something rather than the guys that had, you know, done this wonderful thing. So, you know, after a little bit of pleasantries that I wasn't feeling all that pleasant, but I said, look, I'm here because I'm finding that I really can't write. I can't create new songs or new music because I'm so tied in knots about this contract and this economic situation. I'm thinking that a rational person will see a guy kind of, look, haven't you guys made enough millions? Maybe you'd like to keep me around and give me a little better deal from now on. You know, I think that was sort of what I was thinking, like be man to man, mano y mano, and talk about it, right? So I'm saying I can't create music. It's just really tying me in knots. Suddenly Saul's aunt says, that's not true. I go, huh? That's not true. The whole history of art shows that the best, greatest art in the world is always created under the conditions of oppression and depression. I go, I mean, no shit. I looked at him and I didn't even know how to respond, right? So, I mean, desperate times call for desperate measures. Obviously, talking wasn't going to do. You know, I looked at Ralph Gleason, looked at Ralph Kappel, I looked at Hank, the useless, what do they call it, accountant guy that couldn't keep our utility bills, you know, paid up on time. And I didn't know what to say. So finally I stood up. I said, look, I'm going to get up. I'm going to walk toward the door. And if I go out the door, I'm never coming back here. Now, you want to see a guy take a slow walk to a door that's only 10 feet away? I mean, I'm thinking somebody's going to, this is the goose. Don't let the goose go out the door, right? And so I'm walking, you know, it's like, okay, make it a little slower step, you know. My hand reaches, I mean, I really didn't think that would happen, right? And I reached the doorknob, you know, and wow, nobody said a word. What? The door, and
that was it.
You know. Sorry, I went on about that, but to me, that's like the stupidest people on earth were in that room.
And that was it. And you literally walked out and
yeah, so I was still, you know, under contract to them.
Yeah.
And the contract, without going into all the details, it was going to last at least 10 years and probably more like 20, depending on how many more records I gave them and how fast well, I didn't want to give them any more records, obviously. So I went home and decided what I was going to do was be a one-man band. And just to kind of know a little bit about, I mean, I felt like a prisoner in a dungeon. And I didn't want to go crazy, although maybe I already was, you know. And I had seen a TV show once about a guy that was a prisoner of war. And he was in a, you know, desperate situation. He was, you know, held overseas in a prisoner of war camp. And they kept the light on. I mean, you know, the sleep deprivation, all that, wouldn't give him food. It'd bother him at you know, every couple hours, so he couldn't sleep. And what he did was he started building the house he always wanted to have. You know, he had no tools, nothing. I don't even think there was a table. So he would look at the wall and outline in his mind on the wall his entire house, and he would do it this way, and you know, all the different dimensions, and that kept him sane through like 4 years of, right? Can you imagine every little fixture, when he came home, that guy built that house, by the way. It was probably on One Step Beyond or Twilight Zone or one of those. That seemed to me what I should do, because I didn't know what else to do. Obviously, I mean, I'm not totally I went and saw lawyers, went and saw accountants, went and saw agents. I said, is there something I could do? And everybody said, no, John, you got to give him the music. And I can't give him the music. They've already stolen my life savings, and now I got to give them more records? That's ridiculous. So I practiced drums a lot, practiced bass a lot, practiced saxophone. Eventually, made the album Centerfield.
That's right. And a great album it was. I want to ask one more question because I'm a big baseball fan, and I'm going to have the audience ask some questions as well. Centerfield, the song. We talked about this at your house, and how the actual song came to be, because baseball isn't a normal rock and roll theme. There hasn't been there's been a few, and a few pretty good ones, but aside from the novelty things of Jackie Robinson and Mickey Mantle back in the 50s and late 40s, but
Say hey, Willie Mays.
Yeah. But you came up with the rock and roll baseball anthem.
It's very interesting. As you probably know, I grew up loving baseball, still do. In fact, my oldest brother Jim was a bat boy for the Oakland Oaks minor league team. Way back in the day, we didn't have major league teams in California. And so, that connection. Also, the very first book I can remember ever reading, except for a couple of those, the golden books, those little thin things. The first real book was about the third grade. It was called Lou Gehrig, Boy of the Sandlots. And in other words, I already love baseball, so I was attracted to that book. I, like every kid, at least in those days, I imagined growing up and being a pitcher or a center fielder or something like that. So I really paid attention to baseball. It made me feel there's a warm, I don't know how to say it. I mean, it's a lot different now. We didn't know anything about contracts and all the other stuff that happens. I do know that my dad would sit down in the basement on a Saturday afternoon or whatever, and he'd watch a baseball game, usually alone. So I'd kind of come and sit down and be next to the dad, And I know he'd share a couple stories with me. I remember the one I really remember is talking about Babe Ruth. I think I asked him, "Well, who hit the most home runs, Dad?" So, Babe Ruth. And I was really little. I was 5, 6, 7 years old. And we were in the car, and he said, "Oh, well, how many did he hit?" And my dad says, "Well, one year he hit 60 home runs." I said, "Wow, is that a lot?" And my dad, I think, thought about it, and then he says, "Well, it is a lot, but nobody really thought that was a big deal. This was Babe Ruth. They just, the year before he probably hit 58. They figure next year he's probably going to hit 70 or, hit a lot more." So it wasn't until that stopped, and then, through the ages, back in, this would be the 40s or 50s when we're talking, and that was one of the iconic records of all sports. Anyway, to get into the kind of the present, one day I'm fiddling with the guitar like I do, and I'm playing this little thing on the guitar. It sounds vaguely like La Bamba, and I'm, oh wow, what is that? But it has a little different twist to that, and I was looking for the answer like I did on that other song. Oh yeah, okay. Wow, that's kind of like Spider-Man or something, Woo! You guys who are artistic, you'll know what I mean. It took a leap right there. And so I worked on that riff, and I thought, man, it's a really cool riff. Well, the next day I went back, where I'd go to work every day in my little studio place, and I had a setup where I could record on a professional machine with drums and everything. And so I laid that down, and I started singing to it, right? Now, one of the things, if you're a sports fan, if you get really passionate about it, like some guy makes a bonehead play or whatever, a lot of times objects that are near you will end up somewhere near the television set. or on the wall or somewhere. And during some of those times, I would say, "Put me in, coach!" I'd yell at the TV. They'd be showing like the dugout, and there'd be some young phenom, kind of like Yasiel Puig. He's sitting there. Nobody knows who he is yet. You've read about some guy out there has done some bonehead thing, and they would pan. It's a game of the week on NBC. And there he is. He's like 19 years old, and I'm going, "Put me in, coach! Put me in, coach!" I mean, it was just kind of my own culture I had invented. So I start singing with this riff, right? And it's feeling good, and I'm, wow. And the first naturally thing I sing is, "Put me in, coach! I'm ready to play." Wow. I was delighted. Here was a cool rock and roll riff, and here I'm suddenly into baseball. And it wasn't until later, after I had the song pretty well completed, that I realized, John, baseball and rock and roll never works. It's like going, up a stream without a paddle. It's just, it's gonna go like that. And I told him, I don't care. You know what? It's like John. They're gonna say, "You're corny. You're so corny, Fogerty." I said, "Yep, guilty." At times I really am, I guess. And I just kind of went ahead with that. And I suppose it's, I'm not being coy here. I suppose to some people that really, especially the guys with like 19 million tattoos, it's got to be I'm going to get one that says, "Put me in, coach." I mean, it's corny. It's like,
it's a great song.
But the deal is, especially, this is our country. We're Americans. We play that game here in our country. It's like, if all that stuff is corny, which it probably is, then I'm guilty. But it's cool for that reason.
And it's a great song, right? Thank you. Let's open it up. I know, wow, it's gotten late. Let's ask a couple of questions before we hear some music from John. Let's, yes, right over here. Yes, sir.
How come Creedence wasn't in the Woodstock movie?
How come Creedence wasn't in the Woodstock movie?
Oh, okay. Well, I have to tell you, we arrived at Woodstock all ready to play. I had been, since you've opened what they call that, a Pandora's box. So I'm going to, or a can of worms. So I'm going to give you a lot of information around that, if that's okay. Because there's a bunch of rumors. Number one, that Creedence was the first act to sign up for Woodstock. That's not true. That's totally not true. I know that during that year of 1969, we played all up and down the East Coast. We played Fillmore East, and we played the Atlanta Pop Festival, and a bunch of other, shows during that year, and especially during that summer. And there were billboards all over the place. We'd see, "Come to Woodstock." I think it said "Love, Peace, and Music," and it had a little bird or something sitting on the end of a guitar. I remember that. And we started to hear there were these bands like Crosby, Stills was going to be there, and The Who was going to be. I was hearing other names of people, and finally, about somewhere in July, I think I consented to be in this thing that was going to be in August. But by then, it was. It was all over the media, at least to young people. Okay. And so all I asked, by the way, I've also heard the rumor that our fee was the next highest fee to Jimi Hendrix, and that we got $10,000. But number one, I'm not sure we ever actually even got paid. I don't think that number is true, and I don't really know what the real number is. But there's a lot of controversy in my mind about how much. I do know, though, that I had asked the promoters or whatever, we want a good spot on the night that we're playing, like a headlining spot. And I said, yeah, there'll probably be people on after, but we want, what we'd call the prime time. I assume that to be about 9 or 10 o'clock. It's a festival, and festivals were a brand new thing. Okay, so here comes the other part of that. To answer your question now, they were running late. Everything was running late. It had rained. People were muddy. Of course, people were stoned. People were naked. People were buying water. I couldn't believe that. I took a walk out, among the stuff, and it said water. I think it said $1 for 5 gallons, or maybe $5 for 1 gallon. I could, but just the idea of selling water really made me mad. I thought, what? I mean, there should be a hose. Here, you need, come on. Because there were a lot of people there, and some of them had left their cars like 30 miles away on the freeway, in the middle of the freeway. Okay. The freeway was clogged. Okay, so our time of 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock went past. It got to be midnight, 1 o'clock, the Grateful Dead went on, right? They played for, I think, about 40 minutes, and then their equipment broke. There was silence. And so, hey, Jerry! Yeah, man. Where's my guitar? I can only describe what was probably going on because I wasn't right on the scene. It was quiet for about 40 minutes. Then the Grateful Dead started playing again. Okay? It got later and later and later, and I believe, as far as I know, Creedence went on at about 2:30 in the morning on what was Saturday night. Okay? Finally, hey, here they are, Creedence. We run out on stage, and I start to play, and the lighting and the sound systems were nothing like they are now. And so I could only see out about 4 rows, right? And people were asleep. They were all asleep, right? It looked like basically they were naked, muddy, entwined on each other like that. It looked like those scenes, those gothic scenes like Dante's Inferno, where all the souls from hell are trying to, And I look down there, and I'm trying to kick butt. This is our big shot, our big chance. We're this little band that's, had, I think by then, 3 hit singles. We're making noise and all that. I think by then we might have been the #1 band in America. Or certainly, we were the, what do you call it? The Roman candle that was really moving. And so finally I was so frustrated after about 6 songs, I went to the mic and I said, well, I hope some of you out there are having a good time. We're really trying hard up here. We're having a good time. We're just trying to play our music for you. And absolutely nothing. And then about a quarter mile away in the darkness, one guy's got his lighter. He's going like that. Right? I swear to God, and I never say that. And I hear a voice way out there. He says, don't worry about it, John. We're with ya. So I felt that all that frustration kind of showed in our performance, and I really didn't, they how can I say it, maybe 4 or 5 months later, they sent a tape, it's a reel-to-reel tape of Bad Moon Rising, and said, we'd like to put this, in our movie that we're making about Woodstock. And I just thought, man, we're doing way better than that movie. My band had now been to Albert Hall, and, we were getting acclaim and stuff. And to show us kind of not looking very good is the way I felt about it. So I declined. I just said, no, in other words, it's showing us we're not looking all happy and smiley and white like Jimi Hendrix does in his performance, right? By the way, if you look close, this will be the end of my Woodstock story here. Jimmy had it in his contract that he had to be the last artist to perform at Woodstock. He had to close the show. Well, you notice that it's daylight, right? Right? Think about that. This was Woodstock, and he's the last guy. Well, it got to be so late, that was Monday morning, right? And it was 7 a.m. or 7:30, and if you look out there, and some of the shots, Jimmy was great. He's stunning because all white, and he's doing the Star Spangled Banner. That was an incredible moment in rock and roll. But what you'll never, if you look close, you see it. The place is empty. Yeah. Everybody went home.
Yeah, I know. In the back. Go ahead, sir.
Green River and Old Cody. Green River and Old Cody, a very vivid character. Can you talk about him and your interaction?
Yes. The place my family took me when I was really little was a place called Puda Creek up by Winters, California. It was sort of the Fogerty vacation spot. And every time we went, we'd stay for a couple of weeks, I think, right next to Puda Creek. That's where I learned how to swim. or at least float on my back, and I got all the way across till my dad caught me. Anyway, the place was owned or run by a guy named Cody, and this guy was like 90 years old. Now remember, I'm 4, so this is still in the late 40s, maybe 1949. This guy's 90 years old, and it was explained to me that he was a direct descendant of Buffalo Bill Cody. And so this, this guy, I think what it was like they had to pay the rent to him because he owned the cabin and the little site that we stayed at. And my mind has really toyed with that over the years. I mean, God, if he truly was 90 years old, that puts him back into about 1860 when he was born. He was probably the son of, at least the grandson of Buffalo Bill. I know he was a descendant. I just don't know how close that was. But that was such a fascinating thing to me. I had to make him part of that story.
Let's take one more quick question. Yes, go ahead.
John, your musical career has spanned almost 5 decades. Music very relevant, out there, awards, accomplishments. What's in the future for John Fogerty musically? What do you wish to accomplish that you have not yet done?
First, when you say 5 decades, I want to go, oh! right. I'm very passionate about music. I love music. I love playing guitar. And, that thing, God bless my wife, Julie, for being the person that I got to meet, that I got to survive long enough to meet the love of my life. Thank you for that, and our family appreciates that. What I'm getting at is, there were a lot of times when it was maybe painful for me to play guitar, like in the middle time, the dark ages, as it were. But way back in the beginning, when I was a kid with a paper route, and I'd hear Dwayne Eddy or James Burton, I'd come home and I'd get my guitar out and try to figure out what they were doing. I was very passionate, of course. And I'm that way now. It's just the DNA in people. It's amazing what we get to hold inside. It has nothing to do with what I see in the mirror. How I feel inside when I'm doing that is the same as when I was 11 years old. And so I've worked hard on guitar. I'm proud that I care that much about it. And I can't say that I always understand this. There's a lot of these kind of mystical things that happen if you're calm, if you're not yelling at people and all that. And to me, it seems like there's a purpose. I've been allowed to, again, thank you to my wonderful family and Julie. I've been given the time to practice and work on guitar. 'Cause trust me, when you're 11, you got all the time in the world. You can sit in your room and practice for 8 hours. When you're grown up with children in school and rides and carpools and insurance and homework and everything, you're lucky if you can get a couple hours a day and not feel guilty about it. But I've what can I say? The joy of making music and doing that is what I bring to getting to make records, or the best part is getting to be in front of people and playing. And so I don't know if there's any particular thing. In other words, I always thought I just wanted to make songs, have a great band, play in front of people, play those songs, sometimes be with other artists that I love and jam together with great musicians and exchange musical ideas, right? To me, that was what I saw. In other words, I didn't see like the great American novel, or I got to score the 10 Commandments, or some big highfalutin deal. I always just thought of writing songs, and somehow that would over time, I guess, tell my story. And so I'm looking forward to. I think it's what keeps me going. Frankly, I think this is the vitamin or the energy or whatever. Having music in a house filled with love, the way that I get to live, makes me. How can I say it? They say love what you do, and you'll never work a day in your life, which is how I feel now.
Nice. John Fogerty, everyone. That was great. That was great. And I think you got a guitar up here, so I'm going to give it over to you for a couple of songs. How about it? Yeah? Some songs?
Okay. Boy, now I'm nervous. I feel like this whole thing was like short. Maybe it's probably because I talked too much on one subject. I probably should have been more schizophrenic or something. I will say I don't know how to resolve that because I feel like I'm full of shit. I feel like I'm full of all kinds of stories and with no outlet. Although I am finally writing a book. Of course, it's going to be about as thick as the phone book. You all know what a phone book used to be? Anyway, yeah, I thank you for that wonderful question. I delight in making music, and I'm just really looking forward to, luckily, there's, I don't have anything yet really wrong with me. The usual aches and pains of a person that's older than 30, but nothing serious yet. I still run a lot and all that kind of thing, and I just feel like, I was put on the earth to make music. If I knew how to, do something else, I'd probably be doing it. But like I think Tom Petty once said, I don't know how to do anything else, so I guess I'll do this. This is a song that I wrote that was actually kind of a sad song at the time, but as I've alluded to my wonderful children, my wonderful family, this song has taken on new meaning for me, especially with my youngest child, Kelsey. The reason it really is because at some point I realized that this song has a rainbow in it, and of course Kelsey is certainly a rainbow in my life. Someone told me long ago there's a calm before the storm. I know it's been coming for some time. When it's over, so they say, it'll rain a sunny day. I know, shining down like water. I want to know, have you ever seen the rain? Well, have you ever seen the rain coming down a sunny day? Yesterday and days before, sun is cold, rain is hot. I know, I've been that way for all my time. Through the circle on it goes, through the circle fast and slow. I know, and it can't stop. I wonder, I want to know, have you ever seen the rain? coming down sunny day. I want to know, have you ever seen the rain? I want to know, well, have you ever seen the rain coming down a sunny day? Thank you. I'm going to do Hail Mary first. Clean, huh? There's just so many things involved in music that are fun, neat. Finding this guitar, this style of guitar, as you probably know, I started out playing, Suzy Q at least, was played on a Rickenbacker guitar. And then because of studying artists all through the folk boom, I'm really paraphrasing myself here, but being around Pete Seeger, I got to go to the Berkeley Folk Festival several years, like 1958 through 60 or 61. My mom took me. And it was a wonderful experience. It was like a week-long festival that had concerts every night, workshops during the day, like in a little room just like this. And Pete Seeger would be up on a stage, and he'd show films of people like Leadbelly playing on a flatbed truck in the 30s, And for a kid like me, that was like, wow, it was so inspiring. What I'm getting at is a lot of these old blues guys, especially Leadbelly, played a Stella guitar, a 12-string guitar. And because there was so much tension on the guitar, they couldn't tune it here. Because the guitar, if they wound the strings up that tight, the guitar would blow up. It's just too much tension. So they tuned it down to D. And you hear Leadbelly sing like the Midnight Special with the Golden Gate Quartet. It's just amazing. And so Pete would kind of explain some of this stuff. And then Pete was a wonderful musician, is a wonderful musician. And he'd pick up a 12-string and play it just like Leadbelly. I mean, it was fascinating. And what I got out of that was that D tuning, that low tuning thing. And at some point I decided I wanted to broaden, my thing that I was trying to present to people. And so I got another guitar and tuned it down to D, but it was an acoustic guitar and it kind of fed back and it didn't sound very good. And one day my guitar got stolen right in front of the record company out of my car. And I should have taken a lesson from that. But anyway, that's another story. So I had to go get another guitar to replace that. I walked into this little store in Albany, Jimmy Littrell's music store, and they had a Les Paul up there, one just like this one. I said, wow, let me get that down. And so I tuned it down like this. I plugged it into I think it was a Fender twin reverb amp, and I went, wow. I said, wow, that. I mean, and the guy he was from a different generation. He was kind of, your guitar's out of tune or something, and I said, no, man, listen to that. So anyway, I've told people that was it, and it's still it. This is one of the songs that is used playing that tuning. Left a good job in the city, working for the man every night and day. And big wheel keep on turning, proud memory keep on burning, rolling, rolling, rolling on a river. I cleaned a lot of plates in Memphis, pumped a lot of bang down in New Orleans, but I never saw the good side of a city till I hit the ride on a riverboat queen. Big wheel keep on turning, proud memory keep on burning, rolling, rolling, rolling on a river. Well, if you come down to the river, I bet you're gonna find some people who live. You don't have to worry, 'cause you have no money. People on the river happy to give. The big wheel and keep on turning, proud memory keep on burning, rolling, rolling, rolling on a river. Say rolling, rolling, rolling on a river. Well, thank you so much. Again, I appreciate that you guys came here tonight. Thank you so much. It's quite an honor to be treated this way at the Grammy Museum. By the way, I wanted to mention, because I have kids and I'm totally involved in their lives, some of you folks may be familiar with the movie Night at the Museum. All I know is that in my exhibit, there's a guy wearing a plaid shirt. And after they close this place for the night, he's going right downstairs and he's going to play with the Beatles. And I imagine that everybody else that's ever been in this building is coming back on that night, or maybe every night, and they're going downstairs to play with, the Beatles, the greatest rock and roll band of all time. Anyway, one of the things that I learned from folks like Pete Seeger was sometimes if you're really pissed off, you can make a good song out of it. Well, way back in 1970, for a lot of reasons, I had been in the Army Reserve. I'd gotten some of the straight scoop from the inside and got to see a lot of the not so straight scoop from the outside. And I think I had a desire to express what was on my mind, and I wrote this song. Some folks are born made to wave the flag, ooh, the red, white, and blue. But when they're handing hand to the head, ooh, they point the cannon at you. It ain't me, it ain't me, I ain't no singing that song. It ain't me, I ain't not about anyone. The folks are born silver spoon in hand. Lord, don't they help themselves? But when the tax man comes to the door, Lord, the house look like a rummage sale. It ain't me, I ain't no millionaire son. It ain't me. It ain't me. Ain't I Fogerty one? Yeah, some folks from Harry, Star Spangled Eyes. Oh, they'll send you down to war. But when you ask them, how much should we give? Oh, the only answer, more, more, more. It ain't me. It ain't me. Ain't no military son. It ain't me. It ain't me. Ain't no Fogerty one. It ain't me. It ain't me. Ain't no Senator Star. It ain't me. It ain't me. Ain't no fortunate tie. Ain't no fortunate tie. Ain't no fortunate son. God bless you all. Thank you for coming. Good night. Thank you.
John Fogerty, everyone.